So we had the Neo 2 beta for a whole week and it's just finished a couple of days ago. I spent plenty of time getting back into it, playing around with some of the new weapons, yokai abilities, and doing plenty of yelling and brow firing as I got punished over and over again. My wife even asked me, "Why do you do this to yourself?" And I say, well, the game is actually really fun. And it totally is. I played the first game for hundreds of hours, grinding all the way up to level 448 and perfecting a pretty ridiculously overpowered axe build, which was a lot of fun to play. So how's the second game stacking up? Well, let's discuss. As you've no doubt heard, Neo 2 seems to be sticking with a lot of the core concepts and design elements of the first game. For me, that's a pretty good thing, as I absolutely loved the first game, but there are a few things I wish they improved on, and also some changes which I'm not too fond of. There are 2 new weapon varieties in the game so far, with them being dual hatchets and the switchglaive. I haven't spent a ton of time with the hatchets, but the switchglaive was a lot of fun to play with. The mid and high stances were super fun to use, and the combos you can get when specced into the stance change abilities can dish out a ton of damage. Pair that with a pure magic build and some Omnio and you're away laughing. I did find the low stance pretty unappetizing however, so hopefully that gets a few tweaks, but overall a really solid addition to the game. As for the existing weapons, they have brought them all forward with maybe, just maybe, a few new moves, but again I didn't spend a ton of time with testing them out. And when I took a peek at the axe, there was pretty much the same stuff there. The axe did still feel like the axe, a heavy spin move in high stance that was oh so satisfying to dunk on people with. I really hope they bring at least one more weapon type and a few more shakeups to the existing ones to keep it fresh though. The switchglaive mainly scales off magic, which was an awesome addition. The first game didn't actually have a weapon type that scaled off that, so I went for a magic build, but honestly it felt a little bit underwhelming. This may have been more to do with the gearing, and more on that in a bit, but overall I didn't feel like any of the ranged magic abilities were very compelling to use. The weapon and self-buffing were really handy to have though. The Kekai ability is now called Barrier and really helps out during those Dark Realm phases during the boss battles. And the rejuvenation ability is great, of course, for stretching out a run between shrines. Rest in peace Sloth Talisman though, because that thing is still a hot piece of garbage. The new skill trees are a nice way to present anything, but realistically this has not really provided anything functionally new. It's just more of a modern approach to the UI compared to the first game. Skills are now fanned out in a sphere-like interface, so forward planning is a must, especially in the beta where experience and skill points are fairly limited. Some skills are annoyingly locked behind longer branches of the tree. For example, the ability to increase your magic capacity is locked behind the lightning branch. I went with fire for the most part, which meant I would have to waste a ton of points to get to that ability. Again, I really hope the full release has at least a few new abilities and magics and ninja skills, because right now we're looking at a very, very similar game in terms of build variety and skill usage. One thing that does set this game apart from the first is the yokai shift and yokai abilities. Living Weapon is a thing of the past, and you can now equip 2 soul cores that are dropped from yokai enemies onto your guardian spirit. These will grant you special abilities depending on the yokai it came from and can be extremely potent. Guardian spirits are now split into 3 different types: brute, phantom and feral, and soul cores also correlate to those types. I think there was some kind of synergy between the two, but I wasn't really able to test it properly as I was mainly using the Phantom Guardian and almost all of the cores I got were brute cores. The yokai abilities provided by these cores cost anima to use, a new resource that's displayed as a purple bar under your key. Different cores will use different amounts of anima, and you get anima from just attacking stuff, so that can be used pretty frequently, which is really nice. As I mentioned before, Living Weapon has been replaced by Yokai Shift, where you take on the form of the Phantom, Brute or Feral Yokai, and you have special attacks along with a super ability. Unfortunately, again, I'm pretty underwhelmed by the power of the Yokai Shift abilities, especially the super move. They never seemed to do a lot of damage, and I mainly ended up using them as like a "oh fuck" button, or a way to counter the ridiculous key constraints in the Dark Realm during boss battles. And that's a nice little segue into the bosses themselves. There were 2 main bosses in the beta with 1 humanoid side boss. Humanoid was fine, it was a human boss fight in Neo, you know. There are probably ways to cheese the crap out of it, but for the most part I found it okay. And the two monster or yokai style boss battles on the other hand were probably some of the most frustrating battles I've ever fought. I've played almost all Souls-like games out there, Platinum Bloodborne, beat Sekiro up to New Game Plus Plus, beat Neo 1 all the way up to Way of the Neo and came close to platinuming that as well. Needless to say, I've played a fair amount of rage-inducing games, but honestly nothing has riled me up as much as the two bosses in this goddamn beta. Honestly, they are some of the most bullshit fights I've ever had to endure. Each one took at least 20 to 30 attempts to beat, and that was after restarting the demo from scratch because I thought maybe it was my build that was the problem. Seriously, just take a look. I've seen quite a few people complain about the same thing, and then there's some that say they beat it in 2 to 3 tries, so who knows, maybe I'm just terrible. But I know in my experience, these bosses need some serious tuning. At first I thought the issue was with the difficulty of the bosses in relation to the gear I had, and maybe that is the case. Since this is a demo, and we're obviously, at least I hope, starting out on a level that won't be the first level in the full release, the gear we're fighting them with isn't as good as it would be if we'd had the chance to do a few more missions. But as I upgraded my gear and became more powerful, I found I was breezing through the levels, taking on the regular enemies and even some of the more powerful yokai pretty easily. But the boss battles were always a huge struggle, and I think for the most part this comes down to boss mechanics, abilities, and arena design. Both the bosses were incredibly aggressive and fast. Both had moves that were A, very hard to react to due to how fast they came out, and B, very hard to avoid because of large hitboxes and long animations. The Snake Boy was the easier of the two in my opinion. He was the least aggressive, but he had the worst mechanics and the most frustrating one-hit kill abilities. Firstly, his grab felt almost impossible to predict or even dodge out of the way because of how massive the window was and how fast he could chuck it out. There was no huge wind-up or telegraphed animation to give you time to get out of the way, and it would almost always result in a death when you were caught in it. There was also his choo-choo train attack where he'd lock onto you and charge with his horn. This ability has crazy amounts of tracking, and again the hitbox seemed to be way bigger than his actual head. Again, if you got caught off guard by this ability, it was almost certain death. The first boss was a bit more forgiving with his windows. If he broke your guard, he almost never attacked you while you were recovering, which was oh so nice of him. But other than that, his attacks were relentless. The Beyblade abilities were obnoxious, and overall I just felt like he was one of the more bullshit encounters I've endured through. It was a sigh of relief to beat them rather than the rewarding feeling of overcoming a challenge, which is a telling sign that something's not quite right with how Team Ninja have tuned these fights. The Dark Realm also feels like a pretty cheap way to ramp up the difficulty of all the boss fights, with key restorations flowing to a crawl. You're basically forced to wait it out or play super defensive or maybe pop your yokai shift to make it through. The one little thing I quite liked about the boss battles was that your grave was instantly returned to you upon entering the boss arena. A great little quality of life improvement to save that anxiety run to your grave at the start of every attempt. Apart from the bosses, I really enjoyed the level design of both missions in the demo. First mission had you looping back through and opening shortcuts and all that good stuff that you can expect in some of the greatest Souls-likes, harkening back to some areas of Dark Souls 1. While the second level had a more streamlined A to B approach with branching caverns to explore for extra loot, I liked both levels and I'm happy to see enemy variety and level design being expanded upon the first game. The Dark Realms scattered throughout each level gave a nice little mini-boss style encounter to take on, and overall, I thought this was a good step forward for the game. Funnily enough, I actually found the Twilight mission pretty easy. I don't know if it was because I've, got back into the groove of playing, or I knew the enemies, or whatever, but I bet the boss for the Twilight mission on my first attempt, and yeah, that kind of goes to show this might be more of a gearing and experience thing rather than mechanics, but I still do think those mechanics need quite a bit of tweaking. Anyway, regardless of the shitty bosses, there's absolutely no doubt that I'll be sinking a lot of hours into Nioh 2 when the full game releases. The mix of satisfying combat, looter style gear grinding, build variety, and Souls-like difficulty make this a must play for me in March next year. Definitely looking forward to what other juicy things we get in the full release, hopefully an expanded sphere grid and a couple more weapons. Let me know what you thought though. If you agree or disagree, let's chat in the comments down below. And with that, I'm going to get back to the grind, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.